24/7. Tonight we're going to be talking about Ruth and Boaz. Basically, the story goes like this. A man and wife leave Israel because of a bad famine. And when they leave, they go to a foreign land that the famine is not quite as bad. And when they get there, they have 3 boys, and those 3 boys grow up and marry 3 women. One boy marries a gal named Ruth. Well, bad luck falls on the family, and not only does the dad die, but all 3 sons die. And so the family is left with the mom, Naomi, and 3 daughter-in-laws, one of which is Ruth. And so Naomi, she tells Ruth and the other 2 daughters-in-law, she says, look, you guys still have plenty of life ahead of you. Go ahead, go back to your hometown and marry someone else. Have a family, live a big life. Just forget about this first time and just live a totally different life. And so 2 of the girls are like, okay, and they leave. But one girl, Ruth, she stays. And this is what she says to Naomi. Don't force me to leave you. Don't make me go home. Where you go, I will go, and where you live, I'll live. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Where you die, I'll die, and that's where I'll be buried. So help me God, not even death itself is going to come between us. So Ruth and her mother-in-law go back to Israel. Now, it's important to know that in that day, women could not hold jobs that made a lot of money. And so if you were a widow, you were destitute. You were extremely poor. And so they're going back to Israel looking at a life of poverty. But luckily, God, in the Old Testament, set up this system to where when workers in the field dropped grain as they were harvesting, they couldn't pick it up so that the poor could go after the day is over with and pick up all the leftovers. And so Ruth, she goes out and she's picking up all these leftovers. Now the guy that owns the field is a guy named Boaz. And Boaz takes notice of her. And to make a long story short, they fall in love. Why, God bless that man. God hasn't quite walked out on us after all. God still loves us in bad times as well as in good. That man, talking about Boaz, is one of our circle of covenant redeemers, a close relative of ours. Ruth had met this guy Boaz, and it so happened that Boaz was part of another system in the Old Testament called covenant redeemers. Now, if a man dies and leaves a widow, then the widow marries a relative so that she can be supported by sons. So basically it would look like this. If I died, my wife would then marry my brother, and my brother and my wife would have children to support my wife. But if all the brothers died, then it would go to like cousins and so forth. Boaz happened to be a distant cousin of Ruth's husband. And Boaz takes Ruth in because Boaz loves her and makes her his wife. The story ends like this in Ruth 4. It says, Boaz married Ruth and she became his wife. By God's gracious gift, she conceived and had a son. This is one of those happy ever after stories. The tragedy has struck. The husband, the 3 sons are gone. Both Naomi and Ruth are widows. It looks bleak. But God comes through and provides a husband and really a son for Naomi. And they are blessed because of God's providence. Now, we all know that all too often, love and relationships, they're not all happy ever after. The divorce rate now is way more than 50%. They're not all happy ever after stories, but they can be. I want to show you how to have a happy ending. How you can, if you're a guy, have a Ruth, and if you're a gal, you can have a Boaz. The first thing, let's look at what Ruth and Boaz were like. Ruth was faithful. She stuck it out with Naomi even though the situation got bad. Guys, if you're looking for a lady, you need someone like Ruth who will be faithful to you, because bad times will come. You need somebody who's going to be faithful. If you're considering dating a girl and she has a history of cheating on her boyfriends, well, I've got news for you. Most likely, she's going to cheat on you. Guys, find a gal like Ruth who is faithful. The second thing is Ruth was a hard worker. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't a couch potato. She actually got down to work when it had to happen. And lastly, Ruth was kind. Boaz even says that he noticed Ruth because of her kindness. Guys, here's another practical tip for you. If you're looking at dating a girl, look how she treats her parents. Because if she treats her parents bad, the chances are that she's going to treat you bad eventually. And girls, this goes the same way. If a guy treats his mom bad, he's going to eventually treat you bad. You definitely want to look at their history. You want somebody who's kind, who's gentle, and who's warm. Now, guys, we've looked at Ruth and what you need to find. Now, girls, let's look at Boaz and what you need to look for in a guy. First, you need to look for a guy who's noble. The book of Ruth says that Boaz was noble. Now, we don't toss this word around very much. But what it means is he had character. He had integrity. Because I promise you, if a guy will cheat on a test, then he'll cheat on you. There's a principle there at work. If you do something on a small scale, you'll also do something on a big scale. So gals, watch out. Does he have values? Will he love you? The next thing is you want a guy who is godly. Boaz was extremely godly. And you want a guy, ladies, who will love you and will lead you spiritually. See, girls, a lot of you are looking for guys who are good looking or athletic or whatever. And none of those things are bad. But you first need to look for a guy who is godly. Because a guy who is godly will treat you good and can lead you all your life. Hey, and if he's godly and looks good, that's icing on the cake. But we need to get our priorities right first. Girls, find a guy who is godly. And lastly, find a guy that's smart. Now, I don't mean he made like a 30-something on his ACT. I mean a guy who has street smarts. A guy who knows how to do stuff. Can he change a flat tire while you guys are out on a date? Does he know how to handle himself at a fine restaurant? Does this guy even have a clue? Boaz did. He was a great businessman. He knew what to do. Girls, you need to find a guy that's like that, who can hold his own, who's smart and capable. Now, that was Ruth and Boaz. Now let's look at some tips on how you can find the right person for you. Here's the first one. Find somebody who loves Jesus, because they can't love you unless they love him first. Find a guy who loves Jesus. When Ashley and I were dating, there's a poem that we often talked about that was called Love Her More and Love Her Less. And here's what it means. If you want to love your wife more, if you want to love your gal more, if you want to love your guy more, you need to love them less than Jesus. He needs to be first. And when Jesus is first, then and only then can you really show love. Jesus has got to be first. Practically speaking, if you haven't hung out with Jesus that day, you don't have any business hanging out with that guy or gal. Put Jesus first. Spend time with Jesus first. That way you can love them more by loving them less than Jesus. The next thing is you want to find somebody who can run with you, because you don't want to be slowed down. You want to run together. Now, I know what you're saying. What does that mean? Let me read you this verse. 2 Corinthians 6:14. Do not be unequally yoked. When Ashley and I were dating, actually before we dated, I had this thing for Ashley, and in order to get to know her, I asked her if she would like to come running with me. I was pretty athletic. I swam, and she played basketball, And so we were running together, and it just so happened that I could run faster and further than her. And so we would be running, and she would slow down before I was ready to. Now, I had a choice in my head. Do I slow down and stay with her, or do I keep running? Well, if my goal was to get in shape, I should have kept running. But since my goal was actually to get to know this beautiful girl named Ashley better, I needed to slow down, and I did. Spiritually, here's what this means. When you're running the race of faith, you need to find someone who is at the same level as you, who can run at the same pace. If you're loving Jesus and you're in church and you're in your Bible and God's working in you, you shouldn't date a guy who can barely make it to church twice a month. You need to find somebody who is at the same pace. Because what always happens is the slower person brings the faster person down. So you definitely want to find somebody who's at the same spiritual level that you are. And lastly, you need to be the person that you want to find. Because the person that you're looking for is also looking for you. So if you're looking for a hard-working, godly, noble, kind, faithful person, ask yourself, what are they looking for? Well, they're looking for the same thing. So if you want somebody who is faithful, you need to be faithful. If you want somebody who's kind, then you need to be kind. You need to be the person that you want to find. For instance, ladies, if you're looking for a guy who dresses really, really nice and always has his hair perfect, then you're probably not going to attract him by dressing in sweatpants 4 out of 5 days of the week. You're going to have to look good too. You're going to have to do your hair. Guys, if you're looking for a gal who's just out of the park awesome, you don't need to be a doofus. You need to be the person that you're looking for. Here's the bottom line. We as humans, we cannot love until we've been loved first. You've been searching for love, and you keep coming up empty. I mean, you try to find it in this gal, you try to find it in that guy, but it's all empty. It doesn't satisfy. It's because you're looking for the love that only God offers. And you're never going to find it in a human. If you're a gal and you're looking for a guy who will make you feel beautiful, you're never going to find it until you place your beauty in Christ. Guys, if you're looking for a gal who will make you feel like a man and make you feel worthy, you're not going to find it. Because until you love Jesus and you find your worth in Him, they're always going to let you down. You're looking for divine love among humans, and it's just not going to happen. Divine love comes from God, and that divine love helps us to also give divine love to each other. So guys, I pray for the very best. Statistics say that most of you that are watching this video are going to get married one day. And I pray that it is fulfilling and it's exciting and you are just crazy in love all of your life. But what it takes is you to have character first, and you to love Jesus first, and then find someone who's doing the same.